Zalman Sorotzkin number 6, and he becomes a Rav. His first Steller, what we call, his first Rabbonis, was in a place called Veranova, but we're going to focus on his second, which was in a town called Zettel. Zettel, he was there close to 18 years. Now, something we see at other points in his life was his tremendous vitur. He had, besides being a Gaon, and besides being eloquent, and besides being most nefesh, all the things we're going to learn a lot more about in coming weeks, he gave up of himself for other people. When a machlokas was involved, he wouldn't touch it. And he always had a dream to be making yeshiva. It seems to me from everything I read, unless I missed something, he was never Rosh Yeshiva, and obviously he was someone who was built to be a Rosh Yeshiva. He had all the kochos to be a Rav and a Rosh Yeshiva, like his father-in-law. He had connections, but there were different times in his life when he gave up on those opportunities, not to step on someone else's feelings, someone else's toes. And as soon as he came to Zettel, he had in mind that he would open a yeshiva, but then around the same time there was a Chashav Talmud Chacham who had tried, and Hafuch, he gave up his own ideas and his own ritzonot to open a yeshiva, and he put himself behind that person. I don't think that person's yeshiva worked out, but because he perceived it would have been somehow a pigiyah, would have hurt the other person, he put all that aside, which was very typical. When you read the whole book and you see his whole life, you see that was a very typical thing. Another thing that's interesting about Zettel was, Zettel, of course, was the birthplace of one of the most famous Jews in modern times, was the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim, although he was 40, 50 years older than Rav Zalman, used to call him my Rav, because he was the Rav of the town where the Chavetz Chaim, of course, had left. The Chavetz Chaim was by then, for decades in Radin, but because he had come from Zettel, he used to lovingly call Rav Zalman my Rav, which is probably very neat and a little bit embarrassing for the Zakin Ador, for the Chavetz Chaim to call you such. There's an amazing story, which part of this is known just because Rav Zalman was part of the story and was witness to it. I'm going to say it over. There was a certain person in Zettel who unfortunately he had a taxi. Cars were not at all common at this point in time, this early 1900s or so, and maybe 1910, 1912, something like that. And cars weren't common, but he had a car, and he opened up a taxi service. Well, that wasn't nothing wrong with the taxi service, but he would start driving people on Friday, on Motzi Shabbos, and eventually, as Rav Zalman said, as I said, he had a very sharp tongue, a very eloquent tongue, and he knew how to turn a phrase. He says he was machlif the Seder and Zmir Shabbos, right? It says, of course, that Klai has to be maktim lavo, ma'achrim letzes. We come to the Shabbos early, we leave it late, right? Kabbalah Shabbos early. Shabbos, you're down Rabbeinu Tam. What's wrong? Who's rushing out for Shabbos? First Ma'ariv, down the second Ma'ariv, third Ma'ariv. So he said this fellow mixed it up. He was from those who were machram lavo. He came late, and he was marin letzes, and he left it early. Right? Turn the order around. And then, of course, unfortunately, became Machal Shabbos b'far Hesia. He was openly Machal Shabbos. Okay. And it was very much on Rav Zalman's mind what to do, how to deal with this. It was a pirtza in the tzibur, and not something he wanted to deal with. And this person, let's call him Yossi, he had a father who was a Yehudi Ne'aman, Shomer Torah Mitzvahs, was obviously very upset. And this father had a medical problem. Okay? Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Rav Zalman once went to Radin for a rabbinical conference with other Rabbanim. He's getting to the train to leave Radin, and the father sees Rav Zalman. They're in Radin, right? They're X amount from Zettel. I don't know how far exactly, but they're not in Zettel. Both of them live in Zettel. They're both some reason into the Radin train station. And Rav Zalman says to him, "What are you doing here?" So he says, "I'm sorry, he wasn't in Radin. He was on his way to Radin. I apologize." He said, "I'm going to Radin. The conference was somewhere else. I'm sorry. There was Zettel. The conference was somewhere else. And then there's Radin." Okay? So now, he ran into him at this train station, this middle destination. He ran into the father of the Machal Shabbos. And he said, "I'm going to my house." And he says, "I'm going to Radin." "Radin? Why are you going to Radin?" He says, "I had a dream that my grandmother came to me, and I have this medical problem." And he says, "You're looking for trufot. Instead of going to this is a dream that the Machal Shabbos father had, that my grandmother came to me in a dream." And he says, "You have to go to the Chavetz Chaim and to get his bracha." That's what my grandmother said. Stop looking for doctors. Go get a bracha from the Chavetz Chaim. I got up in the morning all nervous, and I said, I'm going to run from the hospital and to go get the bracha of the Chavetz Chaim. Okay? This is what happened. And Rav Zalman Sorotzkin says, you don't have to run to Radin. He's here. Right again. He was in a rabbinical conference in X place with the Chavetz Chaim, and this fellow said he's traveling to the Chavetz Chaim, and Rav Zalman ran into him and he says, you don't have to go. You want to see the Chavetz Chaim? He's here. So Rav Zalman said, he has an eitzah now. For all this time, he's been thinking, how can he be mashpia on the Mechal Shabbos? He says, you know what? I'll get the Chavetz Chaim to talk to the father, and the father will talk to the kid, and maybe that'll work, right? The Chavetz Chaim obviously has a tremendous power of shichnua to convince people, to get them to do the right things. And he went to speak to Rav Zalman, went to speak to Hill Ginsburg. Hill Ginsburg is one of the two people, on the famous picture, the clip that came out about the Chavetz Chaim that deservedly caused such a rash in the world. So one of the two people, here it says to his left. I'm not sure if it's the Smolo, the Chavetz Chaim's left. So I mean on our right, but I'm not sure if the Smolo Chavetz Chaim. But he's either on the right or the left is Hill Ginsburg. The other person is Leib Broide. There are two people who are there. So one is Leib Broide and one is Hill Ginsburg. So he was one of the attendants of the Chavetz Chaim. So Rav Zalman went to this person and said, listen, I have an idea. And the Chavetz Chaim was sitting in the train. Trains took a long time to take off then. And they were planning a whole thing. He says, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And they were talking outside of the train. And they said, you know what, Hill, I want you to put this person in. And I want the Chavetz Chaim, give the Chavetz Chaim the message that he should speak to this person about the thing. Okay? Now, no one had spoken to the Chavetz Chaim. They go back into the train. And who's already sitting with the Chavetz Chaim? This person. Okay, so no one had spoken to the Chavetz Chaim. So listen what happened. So the Chavetz Chaim, the fellow asked for a bracha. He says, I'm very terribly sick, and I've been in the hospital in Vilna and Warsaw, and there's no trufa. And my grandmother came to me and said, I have to go to you. So the Chavetz Chaim jumped from his place. He said, because Rav Zalman, when he would say over the story, right, this story from Rav Zalman himself, would say that the Chavetz Chaim didn't like these stories and made him into a Baal Mofes, right? The big Rabbanim always get made into miracle workers. He didn't like them. And he says, he looked at him. Again, no one had said anything to the Chavetz Chaim. And he says, who's going to give you a bracha? Yisrael Meir? Bracha's going to help you? I don't have brachas. Who can give you? And then he went on and said that. So then, listen, the Chavetz Chaim said, you know who has the brachas? Ha-brachas Masuras l'Shabbos Kodesh. Shabbos Kodesh has a bracha. Yivorech Elokim es Yom HaShvi v'Kadesh Oso. That's what we say in Kabbalah Shabbos. So why asking for me? Why asking for Yisrael Meir bracha? Shabbos has the bracha. And then he said it again and again. And then he continued. If you keep Shabbos, you'll mikabel the bracha. And then if you want a bracha from me, I'll also give you a bracha. But he says, you don't want to keep Shabbos. And you think it's enough to get a bracha from Yisrael Meir. That's not possible. I don't give a bracha. I can't give a bracha without Birchas Shabbos. If Shabbos is there, Chavetz Chaim said I could help out. Everybody was speechless. Everybody was listening to this. And then the Chavetz Chaim said it again and again. And each time he gave a little bit of a tosefet and he would emphasize something else. Amazing. Reb Hillel and Rabbeinu, right, that's the Rav Zalman, looked at each other in amazement. It's as if the Chavetz Chaim had read their minds. And then the Chavetz Chaim went on and said, maybe you'll say, right, again, he had repeated himself a lot, then he continued, maybe you'll say, you do keep Shabbos. But it says, Lo tasa kol malacha atav vincho vitecha. You, your son, and your daughter. B'kol mitzvahs lo nemar lo tasa kach v'kach atav vincho vitecha. It doesn't mention your son and daughter in other mitzvahs. It doesn't say it by shatnes. Each one is achrei for itself. But when it comes to Shabbos, the father is responsible, even if they're older. Even if you're keeping Shabbos, but you're bent. Listen, the Chavetz Chaim said, Ben shecha noseh b'Shabbos. Oh, bat shecha, your daughter's combing her hair. No one knew about the daughter. Now they knew. You can't get the bracha. So my bracha won't help you. So Rav Zalman used to say over, we knew there were only Mamish Ruach HaKodesh. The only three people who knew about the son were me, the father, and Reb Hillel. There's no way the Chafetz Chaim could have known it. Yeah? And then he said, Rebbe, ani maftiach lecha, shelo yeh od bebeiti ma shehaya ad hayom. So he said, I promise you, Rebbe, that I will make sure. Ani mavkesh et bracha. And the Chil Shabbos start. It's an amazing story. So he says, we hear stories, Rav Zalman used to say, but this was so muchashi, it was so in front of us, his Ruach HaKodesh. And of course, there's so many stories about the Chafetz Chaim today. We're rugil to it, but then when Rav Zalman saw it, it was absolutely shocking. He was witness to this story. So I thought it was nice to share what the event that he'd had with the Chafetz Chaim.